let's start with just a brief introduction, and then I'll dive into some questions for you.
Sure.
Awesome. So really nice to meet you. I'll introduce myself to begin with. So my name is Angela. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by training, which is just a bunch of really big words smashed together. But essentially, I'm helping lead our growth efforts here in EMEA for Sapia. But my background spans consulting pretty much anywhere in the HR space, whether that be selection and recruitment, all the way through training and development. But today's not about me. Today's about you, Sebastian, who is the head of recruitment for Joe and the Juice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started with Joe and the Juice and what your role and responsibilities are now?
Yeah, but unlike you, I'm trained to do juice, more or less. I have no university background. I started in Joe and the Juice back in 2010, straight out of high school. Thought I was going to study, got declined many times for that school. Figured out I was quite good at people and quite good at the service industry, and have simply worked my way up in Joe and the Juice. So started as what we call a juicer, making products, serving guests, and have been through the entire career ladder from everything operational, now sitting as global head of recruitment for the entire group, trying to figure out what is good strategies on recruitment, who are the right people. There, Sapia comes in and helps us a little bit, and how to retain them.
Awesome, thank you. And what is your favorite juice from Joe and the Juice?
That's a good question. I actually, coming into this, you asked me if I could have a fun joke coming into this. I've been with Joe and the Juice for 14 years. That's almost 4,000 work days. So I've had a lot of juices, a lot of sandwiches, and I'll tell you, the sandwiches I can't eat anymore. They simply don't go down. The juices never get tired. So I'll take the Green Mile, which is very good. Please don't ask me what's in it, because I won't remember.
Okay. I like the Energizer one.
That's also
yes,
good.
Yeah, it's got grapefruit in it, and the Sapia Pink, just so you know. Yes. Okay, awesome. Well, I'd love to start by setting the scene. I understand that we have various levels of understanding of the Sapia product and our relationship to Joe and the Juice. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background and context. But Sapia started about 7 years ago. We're headquartered in Melbourne, but have a tremendous presence here in EMEA and globally. But we really started with our flagship product, which is the world's first AI chat interviewer. And since then, we've innovated and grown and developed and heard a lot from our customers about really creating an opportunity for us to build what we call an end-to-end volume hiring platform. But we'll be really focused on that chat interviewer today and seeing that come to life for the candidate experience and how we can truly scale something meaningful. But we think of ourselves as today really a full hiring platform. So incorporating things like video interviewer, automated interview scheduling to help further streamline that process a little bit more. What's really guiding our product are some core principles. Now, yes, we are in AI, yes, we are in technology, we gather a lot of data, but we're using that to really elevate the human experience. So creating these opportunities to deliver delight to your candidates and give something back to them for committing to you and being part of that process. So you'll see these core elements really help drive our product and is why we're trusted by dozens of really global enterprises that you see. A lot of those, a couple of them are in the room here today. Raise your hand if you're a customer of Sapia or soon to be a customer of Sapia. Got a few of those. Awesome. But you'll see that this spans quite a bit of different industries, everything from rail to telco, and then really amazing consumer brands like Joe and the Juice, which we'll hear a lot about today. All right, so let's dive into it. We're going to start with just kind of a fireside chat, and we do have some Q&A towards the end, so if you want to hold any questions, we'll be able to answer those more towards the end. All right, Seb, so we all know and love your brand, but not everyone knows the origin story of where Joe started and how it got to where it is today. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, we are a Danish brand founded in Copenhagen back in 2002. The original founder, Kasper Basse, was a marketing director at the time and also did very high-level karate, so he's a black belt. When he was going around, he obviously thought a lot about nutrition, being a sportsman and so on, and couldn't really find anything easy, grab and go that also supported his health journey. And simply couldn't bear with that, so he started his own. Started in Ny Østergade, the first store, where he was alone behind the bar, Monday through Sunday, trying to make amends, so to speak. And one day, our second ever hire, called Philip, or goes by the name People, comes into the store and asks for a job. Kasper had been invited to his mother's birthday in Cannes and had declined because he had to operate the store. He was like, okay, let's give it a go. We'll try to put Philip behind the bar. He was really nervous about it because this was like his child, this store. Calls Philip after the first day. Normally, Kasper did around, let's try and translate this to pounds, around 500 pounds a day in revenue at that time. He thought that was really good. He called Philip, like, what's up? Did you burn down the store? Is everything still all right? Yeah, it went fine. We did around 2,000 pounds today. He was like, okay, you quite upped our revenue. What did you do? And that's where the sort of the Joe and the Juice culture comes in. People is the founder of how you act behind the bar, how you greet guests and customers, how you treat each other, for that matter, behind the bar. And we have ever since trying to conceptualize what People does and put that on a can. Still trying to do so, but we're getting closer every day. And then growing from one store to most recently opening in Stavanger to 388 stores across 17 different markets, operating all of those. Also recently opening franchise stores in the Middle East, but 388 of our own stores to this day.
Wow, that's incredible. 17 markets. That must have put a toll on your recruiting team.
Yeah.
So tell us, what were some of the main recruitment challenges as you continued to scale into these 17 different markets?
I think when you are scaling and when you are constantly opening new markets without any guidance, so to speak, parachuting, give people a iPad with a POS on it and say open stores in this market, you tend to focus a little bit less on recruitment and all the strategy and all the holistic, and focus more on just not burning down the stores on a day-to-day basis. So over the past let's say 10 years, when we've grown quite a bit, there has been a lack of focus in the recruitment, and it has offered up a lot of silo work, people wanting to do it their own way. And I think that's been the main challenges. Obviously, scaling to this extent requires quite a headcount. We hired 5,000 people alone last year. Being in the food and beverage, employee turnover tend to be in the high end. People use us as a gap year job or as a summer job. So scaling to that part has been very difficult, trying to keep people in line. So some of the challenges has definitely been that getting enough people at the right time, but definitely also finding the right people, retaining those, and avoiding bias, screening time, and so on and so forth has been some of the greatest challenges growing to this amount.
Yeah, and globally as well, right? You work in multiple languages, right? So that crossover must be difficult.
Yeah, and cultural as well, right? So people are different, and people come from different backgrounds, and obviously we want to accommodate that. That's a part of the Joe culture. So yeah, that comes with challenges.
Yeah. So we've got an interesting stat on the screen here, 300,000 applications per annum. This is a great opportunity for us to hear from the crowd about what your challenges may be. Maybe similar, might be quite different. So we'd love to take this opportunity to do just a quick poll, if you wouldn't mind grabbing your cell phones. We'll switch screens here and just understand a little bit more, what recruiting challenges are you facing these days? So if you're unfamiliar with these, just scan that code. It'll take you to a quick poll, and then we'll create a word cloud. Give you a few moments to do this. So Seb, it sounded like there was quite a bit of change management that needed to go along with the scaling of the recruitment teams as well, too.
Yeah,
okay.
There was, which has been one of the major ones.
Awesome. So we've got some data coming in here. Ooh, these are good ones. Too many applicants. Keeping the culture. Yeah, that's a great one, especially given how critical yours was to part of the growth.
Definitely.
Finding the right people, quality of candidate. All right, awesome. So considering some of the challenge that you had around scaling globally, maintaining the culture of the brand, why did Joe and the Juice adopt an AI hiring solution compared to perhaps something else?
I think if anybody is early adapters, or anybody should be first movers in terms of trying to blind hire, go AI. I I think it needs to be Join the Juice. It was important for me to offer a fair way of recruiting, and prior to this, I couldn't say that we did, not with good intent at least. So yeah, as you said, 300,000. I think we are closing actually on 400,000 per annum now, scaling quite a bit over the next 4 years, so that'll only grow. And my biggest worry was that we were only talking to top 5% of the pile when screening CVs. Obviously allowing a lot of bias when screening CVs. I can try and train our recruiters as much as I want to about reducing bias, avoiding bias, making them aware of their own bias. But regardless, people will hire in their own image. You will believe that if you're clicking with somebody, they will automatically be good at their job, regardless of having seen any information that they are. And I think that was important to me to be able to say, yes, we are offering at least a fair part of the first process. And then simply from a mass perspective, like if I wanted to screen all CVs, I needed to have 5 full-timers doing 37 hours a week, only screening CVs year round. Not really a sustainable solution to do so. So from my perspective, it wasn't. Obviously, it was a part of offering or be able to actually look at all these candidates and how do we know that it's the best candidate that we're actually talking to? How do we know that there's not a better applicant at the bottom of the pile? But from the get-go, it was actually about candidate experience, offering that, being able to.
Yeah, and you mentioned having a fair process was really important. Help us understand what the process looked like before Sapia. Was it mostly hiring managers kind of picking what was at the top of their candidate pile, or was it more centralized?
Yeah, so I think we are maybe a bit an odd one out in these terms, and every time I talk to somebody, they don't really understand our setup. I'm not sure I fully do either, but for now it works. So we have, depending on seasonality, obviously we are very busy during summer and seasonal holidays, so when everybody else is off, that's our peak season. So depending on seasonality, we have between 25 and 35 recruiters across all 17 markets. So that's a lot of people trying to align. That's a lot of people to try and train, not hiring in their own image. So beforehand, we even not only 2 years ago, we also worked without an ATS. So we had emails coming into inboxes trying to.
My skin is crawling.
Yes. And I think coming from 2 years ago, I stepped into this position. That was the first thing I did because I saw that was one of my main issues from trying to hire. Sorting through mailboxes, flagging things, and those disappearing in Outlook, right? With ATS, it was a lot about. Screening on Mondays, calling in on Tuesdays, interviews Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, more or less. Obviously with variances, but to that extent, they more or less only screened the people that were on top of the pile, and I think that's where my concern came from, that we were missing out on a lot of good applicants, but we were also providing a fairly horrible candidate experience for all the people that only just everybody got a rejection, but not really a reason to why, and the reason to why at that point was simply lack of time.
And that's always been the trade-off, right, with volume recruitment, is how do you scale something that's also fair, but gets you the opportunity to see the potential in everyone, and that's the tricky part. So as a consumer brand, right, your candidate experience is just as important as your consumer experience.
Sure.
I would imagine that of those 300,000 applicants, a lot of those are your customers as well. So help us understand, how did Sapia help expand that candidate experience in terms of diversity and inclusion, and really making people feel like they're part of your brand?
Yeah, so the entirety of the first step is firstly tailored around us, right? So the questions sound like we would ask them. The chat looks like it's operated from us, and I think just simply the fact that everybody gets a first interview. So we can offer between 300 and 400,000 first interviews, around the clock. I think it's nice, especially for the generation that we are hiring now, Gen Z coming in. They're very tech adaptive. We can also see that 63% of every interview completed is on phone. So people are applying on their device, and they can do that on their own time, right? So we can get applications in 24/7, 365. It's not really on account of that has to be a recruiter present. They can do this. They can also, if they're on the bus, they only have 5 minutes. They can do the first part of the interview, then they can complete that later. And I think that's that's really meeting them where they are, rather than they have to fit in with what we can offer. And now we can really, on a mass scale, regardless of how many applications we'll ever get, if we reach 1 million, we'll still able to do the same. So that branded first interview experience, and obviously the way that we're also now able to actually offer everybody not only rejections, but as actually responses on what did you do good, what can you improve on, some coaching tips to their further venture into the world of working.
Yeah. So as part of the Sapia product, actually, once they complete that first interviewer, everyone gets a customized My Insights report. So those candidates get back some tips and tricks on how they're showing up, their strengths, opportunities for improvement. And so they can take that as a professional development piece, whether they're successful in a role with Joe and the Juice or not. So a really nice give back and really delivering that delight to the candidate. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll give you all the opportunity to actually experience applying to Joe and the Juice. It's just a sandbox, so don't expect a job applicant. Yeah.
If you want one, you can come see me after.
Yes. Now, we get some incredible feedback from not only heads of recruitment, but also actually candidates on this experience. A lot of it, though, ends up coming to you directly.
Yes.
We've heard from parents saying, this is the first time my son has ever had an interview. Thank you so much for giving them that opportunity. Have you heard feedback from candidates similarly?
Yeah, so we can see that when we're looking at these at this anonymous feedback, we can see that in like the far overwhelming part of it is very, very positive. So people are very happy that they can do it on their own time. They think it's the prompting questions that we're asking in the chat is a nice way for them to also get to know themselves a little bit. So they're actually becoming more self-aware when they are answering these questions. It triggers them to think a little bit about how they are and what they actually like in life. And I think that is I didn't know that we were going to be able to offer self-awareness to all our candidates, but I think that's, especially in the world that we're living in, is a great tool to bring forward. We can see that 9 out of 10 candidates find the survey engaging. We can see that around 60% is actually leaving a comment, a voluntary comment, when they are finishing the chat, and the vast majority of those are very, very positive.
So what's been the impact of introducing Sapia on some of your recruiting screening time, efficiencies, things of that sort?
So as I said, it mainly came from a candidate experience piece, but when we're looking at it now, we can see that our recruiters are roughly saving a full working day per week screening CVs. We have between, as I said, 25 and 35 of those, so that amounts to quite a bit. And we are, in general, we're calling ourselves, or we're striving to be the first truly people-centric food and beverage company in the world. I wouldn't be able to say that if I just took back those 8 hours and said thank you as a time saving. So obviously we are giving that back to the recruiters with more meaningful work, and that could be hosting longer interviews, giving them time to actually do a proper onboarding, take a part of the offboarding as well when people are leaving us. So to complete the cycle, so that the first person you're talking to is actually also the last person that you're talking to. I think that's a nice bow to be able to tie. A full working day per week we're actually able to take out by not screening CVs, but going off color codes and scrolls.
Amazing. So the juice is worth the squeeze?
Pun intended.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we've got some great stats. Just initially, in your first 3 months, we saw 3,000 hours were saved.
Yes.
That's an incredible amount of time. And a 33% reduction in your time to hire.
Yes, and that's globally. So going from around 18 days time to hire to 12 days time to hire. And I think especially coming in food and beverage, where a lot of people are applying to a lot of different jobs at the same time. So not necessarily applying to join the Juice because we're cool, but because they need a job, which is fair. I think we need to be fast at putting them behind the bar. We need to be fast at actually offering them a salary check. So the sooner we can do that, the bigger the chances are that we actually get their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And we think about this as like really building that capacity, right, for your team to do more strategic tasks, focusing on those high value candidates, more white glove experience towards the end of that process, those exit interviews, which can be so incredibly valuable. Yeah. So awesome. So how do you see the partnership with Sapia impacting your future growth at Joe and the Juice?
Yeah, but as I said, we're going into quite a heavy growth spurt. We have those just under 400 stores now. We expect to have 1,000 units in 4 years. It's quite immense. That comes down to roughly 40,000 hires over the next 4 years. So obviously that's a great support to be able to narrow down the short list of people that we want to speak to, who are the best candidates. How are we identifying the ideal juicer DNA? And then also coming into a leadership piece, we're touching base on a little bit in terms of how to find leadership in our stores and starting to recruit externally. We've never really done that. We've promoted from within.
Homegrown, yes.
Yeah, so my own story being very obvious of that. But we can also see with the scale that we're going into that it's not really possible. We want people to have experience when they're coming into a store manager role. So already now beginning to investigate the leadership part of our new model with you guys. But an essential part is obviously hiring 40,000 people over the next 4 years. It wouldn't be very fun without some help.
Yeah. Our team member who supports the Joe and the Juice account, you were with him last week for quite a bit.
I was.
Scoping out some of this.
Yeah. I bared with him over the last 2 days in Copenhagen. No, so yeah, we were scoping out a little bit on the leadership side, but mainly on candidate experience and how do we make the most seamless flow. And Matt has been very, very invested in Joe and the Juice. And as we joke a little bit about that, we talk more to each other than we do to our wives, which is not necessarily a good thing, but that's the way it is right now. So Matt has been a tremendous help in terms of both setting up and rolling out, but also in the continuous growth.
Oh, bravo, Matt. Yeah. Awesome. Well, adopting a new strategy, a new project, a new tool is obviously very challenging when you think about change management within teams. Yeah. How did you build the support for Sapia at Joe and the Juice?
I think that's actually been the biggest surprise for me, the change management piece, and how not everybody off the bat thought it was as a great idea as I did. Surprise. People don't like change in general, and I think that piece has been the biggest part, but I think the Sapia team has been extremely good at supporting that in terms of that really doing it on our terms, the way that we wanted it to. We could have done it in 4 weeks if we wanted to. We didn't want to. We wanted to roll out regionally based on quarters, so we took our good time, implementing thoroughly in markets, having one-on-ones with all the people that were going to be responsible in different markets. And here also the cultural aspect comes in. When you're talking to the team from Norway and you're talking to the team from New York, you can't have the same approach. You need to adapt that and based on nationality and knowing that. And obviously I have the insights for that, but Matt has been very good at adapting and being willing to try and win hearts and minds and convince them that it's a good tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, that's a whole part of the process, is that internal change management, right?
Definitely.
You mentioned different regions.
Yep.
We support you in multiple languages. Do you know them off the top of your head?
I do. So English, obviously, Danish, Norwegian, Finnish, Swedish, French, German, Flemish, Swiss German, and then we made a specific model for New York due to regulations as well. Yep. So that's quite a bit, and we're actually offering bilingual in all markets, so people can choose to do it on their native language, or if we have expats applying in Norway or in Denmark, they can do it in English.
Great. So again, that way to meet them where they're at, tailor that experience, but scale it.
And that was turned out to be very important in France. They are not. Not very good at English. It's not something that they're really taking with them. So that was a very important piece that we were able to support that.
Yeah, and if you think about your culture, right, and that really being about the people behind the bar, you should be meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, we should, and we should accept them as they are, and we should meet them where they're at. And obviously, I'm also better at it. I'm fair at English, but I'm better at expressing my deepest values and core beliefs in Danish. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. All right, so what are 1 or 2 things that you would consider the most valuable that you've learned through your journey with Sapia?
Okay, I think the change management piece has definitely come as a big part of that. And that's also me maybe being a little bit gullible, expecting that people saw the exact same without having talked to you guys, without having talked to Barb, without having talked to Matt. So that piece of adapting it and actually using it in practice has definitely been the biggest challenge and what actually surprised me the most. Mm-hmm. I would say how hard that actually been, and that's still a work in progress, right? Mm-hmm. Almost here a year after the first markets that we're still trying to get that fully implemented. And then I would say that I, as many other people, also came with the assumption that AI would be biased and so on and so forth. But I've been proven wrong, and I think that's been an exciting journey, and I've learned a lot. And I've unwillingly become the AI expert of my surroundings, and I tried my best. And when I'm in doubt, I'll ask Matt.
Yeah, we say that a lot. When in doubt, ask Matt.
Ask Matt.
Yes. So when you say change management, yes, of course, there's that AI piece, and we'll tease a little bit about our next event, being really focused on understanding the regulation that's coming our way around that. But what was it specifically around change management? Was it the process and people wanted to still own that, or tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, I think when working with that many cultures, you also need to be wary about how you lay things out. So often when coming from HQ perspective, at least with us, it's not always seen as a help, it's more seen as an audit and telling people that we know better. Which we obviously don't. That's why we have them, otherwise we wouldn't have them. So we need their insights into nationality, and I think that piece has been the biggest part in terms of not implementing and rolling out, because that was more or less click of a button, because the integrations works really well also with our ATS. But more in the terms of actually for people to understand what extra optics and tools it gives them, and what insights they can actually gain on each candidate, and that it's not just an extra work progress that they need to go through because HQ says so, but it's actually offering them help, saving them time, giving them the tools to choose the right person the first time rather than the 10th time.
Okay, so really more about the value it can bring.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. And I would imagine your hiring managers too, right? Their value is really in the stores with their teams and with their people,
sure.
Versus doing a tremendous amount of hiring.
Yes.
So, okay, makes sense. Seb, is there anything we haven't discussed yet that you think it would be important for us to touch on?
No, I think obviously it's always interesting to talk ROI and what are we actually saving. But I think from my perspective, the candidate experience piece is the most important. We're actually able now to offer everybody an interview. We're not ghosting anybody. We are fair and we are unbiased in the first parts of our process. So I think underlining that would be my only thing to do.
Yeah. The headline for today, right?
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, we'd love to take this opportunity to open it up for Q&A for both Sapia as well as Sebastian. So we'll open it up for any questions that you have. I'm happy to repeat them as well. We don't have mic runners. So yes, please, Dan.
Just a couple, if I may. When originally when you took Sapia to Expo, what did the investment case look like? And did you get any challenges?
So the question, I'll just repeat it if that's okay. Yep. So when you took the business case to the executive committee, what challenges did you have and what did it look like?
When never having done something like this before, it's obviously can be a big investment. And I think one of the challenges that when you're working with especially finance people, our CFO as an example, they want to see return on investment prior actually having implemented anything, which can be hard. So for me, it was really about building a narrative around them just saying yes, and building a business case that can prove to them that it doesn't take much. The approach I went with was actually calculating a zero sum. So how many people do we need to retain more than we're already doing before this isn't a cost? So if we're zero summing, I think that's a good. Why shouldn't we do it? Because then we are offering the best candidate experience that we can, best in class, best in line, without any cost. So why shouldn't we do that? And that turned out for us to be around 42 people that we needed to retain more than we did last year, which isn't a lot, and that sort of sold it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So more about the turnover component.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
A retention piece, so to speak. So obviously, as I said, I needed to present something to the CFO that was monetized. He needed to see that what was the cost and when did we begin to bring that back, and we did that if we retained more than 42 people.
Yeah, which I know is very similar to your business case as well. When we think about Sapia, typically organizations are coming to us for two reasons. One, around the efficiency, right? So, this is painful. How do I get to everyone? But then how do I find the best candidate, right? So that quality of hire, making sure that they're not turning over, you're hiring that right person from the start. And it sounds like you took the turnover component, but you also have beautiful stats around that efficiency you get to see from day one, right?
Yes.
Because you're doing the work of, it would take 10 recruiters 10 years to do what we can do in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, incredible. Next question.
Yeah, it was interesting with the 300,000 applications, and some, probably a lot, potentially being customers. Did you do any calculations around, and if you did, what did that look like around being able to establish a physical cost benefit or downside to giving your candidates a bad experience who are then customers?
Yeah, I borrowed stats in that term. So actually this came from a Virgin Mobile case that they did a few years back, where they actually tried to do some calculations. Obviously that'll a lot of the time be assumptions, but trying to do a business case on what did a bad candidate experience cost them. And that's actually when I saw that, there was one of the sparks to initiating talks with a system that can help us give a better AI experience. So I showed that case, and that sort of sold the brand.
Yeah, because I can get a coffee anywhere, right?
Yes.
But if I have a poor candidate experience
You'll
with
never
Joe
come
and the
back to
Juice,
Joe and
yeah,
Juice.
and I'm going to tell my entire family and friends about
Exactly.
it. So
Yeah.
For You definitely has an opportunity cost. You touch a lot of people.
Definitely.
Yeah, we've built similar business cases for other organizations too. Yeah, these are great questions. Do you have more? No? Looks like we have another.
I was wondering, you mentioned that you had to build a separate model for your New York recruiting. We've tried in the past to kind of bring any AI into our recruiting process, and it's been majorly pushed back by our North American East Coast advisors in legal.
Yeah.
So I just wondered kind of how that looked for you, and how you kind of put the business case to them, and then how you had to do things differently in North America.
Yeah. I might need help here, Matt, so please interrupt me if I'm wrong. But there are some AI regulations in New York that we needed to attend to. And what we did was that we simply ran a model for bias testing. Now I'm looking straight at you. Bias testing, ensuring that it wasn't biased. If it came back, we needed to retrain the model to fit in within the AI regulations in New York. Is that more or less correct?
Yes. Yeah, so it's exactly what you just said there, but more behind that is the compliance piece as well. So you can certificate that it's get audited by a third party, and you incorporate that in the recruitment journey, your job adverts, specifically for New York. So you do that thing, and it's an easy journey.
Yeah, very much.
But you very much partner on it, do you, to kind of...
Yes, so yeah, we collectively do it. We'll do between us. The audit will sit with us, and then we'll share that back with them, and they'll then incorporate in their standard business process for New York positions, and specifically an individual model for that particular region.
Yeah.
That gets through.
Yeah, and it's screening on the same things, right? So we're still looking for the ideal user DNA in New York, which is similar to Miami, similar to Denmark, for that matter. But the model had to be retrained due to regulations. So the questions are the same, the outcome is the same. But yeah, what lies behind is a little bit different.
How do you explain that the AI is not making the decision?
So what we said was that it's a recommendation. So it's not, you don't, my narrative has been, because the US piece has actually, in a formal change management perspective, been the hardest. So my narrative has always been that you don't, to begin with, you don't have to look at score. Matt has already told me not to say that, but to begin with, don't mind score as long as they have a rating. Then you can hire whoever you want. You can hire your reds, your ambers, and your greens, as long as they have a Sapia rating, because we need that data to be fed back into our system, so that we can actually begin to see which of these personality profiles coming in are the ideal user DNA. So who are staying for longer, who are actually performing with tenure in role or growing into leadership. So from my perspective, it's been on that, focusing on that they have a score, that we cannot hire any people without a score, and then really trying to feed them that narrative around having extra insights, so that they essentially in time will have to do less interviews, because that's the tedious part about it, especially when you in New York last year in May we hired 150 people for those around 30 stores alone, right? So that's quite a bit. So obviously a part of the carrot around it was that also, like, you need to do less interviews if you do this right.
Yeah, and trust is one of our core values
Exactly.
here at Sapia. And so when we think about recruiting with AI, what's really important is that we have a human in the loop in that process, and we give you full transparency. So that human in the loop will sit up front before we ever engage with a customer, where they're signing off on that model, which includes that bias testing. We're aligning to adverse impact. I'm American, I understand the New York stuff, it can be painful. So that's one area where we have business case sign-off on that model, the weightings, again, giving you full and transparency into that scoring model. And then also afterwards, right? So we would never recommend a solution where you don't have some human making that decision. What Sapia is doing is help streamline that process and giving you a recommendation based on that. But you still have full transparency into that candidate's answers, their interview, so you essentially get to make that decision moving forward. We're giving suggestions. But these are excellent questions, yeah. Wonderful.
What
Yes.
happens to repetitive applicants? So there must be a lot of people who have been rejected and probably change their answers in order to get a second stage or to move forward.
Serial applicants, yes. Yeah, so we actually have some pretty smart technology behind the models, and what will end up happening is if someone applies to the same role using the same assessment package, we'll use what we call a reuse rule. So within 90 days, if they do reapply, we will use their same test scores. Essentially in that model, what we're looking for is a combination of three things: personality traits, behavioral competencies, and communication skills, which is a really good indicator of general intelligence. So we think of those as pretty semi-stable. So that's why we give kind of that 90-day rule. But if they were to reapply after 90 days, they would get a new opportunity to use that same assessment package. Now, if they were applying for a juicer and then maybe one of your leadership roles, those would have different questions. So that would be a different assessment package, and therefore they would be able to walk through that process as a new applicant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but does also mean that at first, if we start working with Sapia, there will be a lot of screened applicants who are definitely a no from our side, but we need to screen from the process now, and then moving forward potentially, even though they change their answers, there are still some applicants that cannot be considered for certain roles because, for example, they're in our bed list due to pet or etc. So how do you deal with those personalities that are, I wouldn't say serial, but they're just on your red.
Persistent, yeah. Yeah, so one of the beautiful things is that we'll integrate with your ATS. And so that's where we can start to flag multiple things that we would see or indicate areas where it would be something you would want to look into a little bit further. So I know we integrated with your ATS, about 70% of our customers are integrated, and that really helps streamline that process further. So we're matching up essentially a person's assessment answers with that flow in the ATS. So if we were to see essentially them tying up to multiple applications, that would be flagged for you. Is that, am I answering your question? Okay. We'll start here and then I'll move over there, yes.
You've talked about a lot of the applications, it sounds like all externally facing. Have you used Sapia internally for internal
mobility?
Yeah.
No, not yet. Not for the juicer piece or the juicer piece, because they are already in-house, so to speak, and that's entry level. So that's why you start. But we will be using it when or if adopting the leadership model with Sapia. We will also be using it for internal recruitment in terms of when people want to apply to become a store manager, they need to go through the same process, and that part's the Sapia piece as well.
It's an excellent question. I feel like I can't have a conversation without talking about talent mobility. And what's beautiful about Sapia is you're going to have a full skills profile on every single person that you hire. So when we think about the future, and our innovation really lies around how do we take that data and create opportunities for you to understand where those individuals fit within the organization, maybe cross-functionally or in a different role. Which can be great when you think about organizations that maybe have multiple different groups, or you have to furlough, a group for some reason, thinking about giving them opportunities within the business. You'll be able to match that to specific job roles. So that's a future product that we have coming out. Probably another breakfast series on that one, but you're onto something. Yes, Nicola.
So in terms of the amount of applications you get, recruiters, the vendor schools, do all of your recruiters sit within the recruitment team? Do you allow any hiring managers within stores to access the Sapia platform and do their own recruitment?
Depends a little bit on what market we're looking at. As a general umbrella, we are centralized on the recruitment. As I just told you during this lovely talk, we are looking into hire around 40,000 people over the next 4 years. So obviously we need to delegate. That can't be centralized. So we are in the midst or in the working of putting the recruitment on store managers. so that they hire for their own teams. We are doing that in some markets. We're doing that in France as an example, where they have access to the talent insights profile, so they can see what chat responses has been given. My favorite part is the recommended interview questions. So based on the personality profile, what they've done really good, we don't really need to probe. What they have some challenges on, we get some recommended questions on. So really to deep dive on that, and that's what we're using the time that we're giving back to them from the screening, right? So that they have time to do these proper interviews. I want to say almost like white collar hiring rather than blue collar, so that we really spend some time and not only just these quick questions.
Yeah, because Sapia is really simulating that structured interview for you, right? And based on what we know from their answers, that's what's recommending these interview questions of where should I dig a little bit deeper for those store managers who aren't always necessarily trained to be the best interviewers. So, yeah. Additional questions? Yes, Chris.
At what point, if you're there already, would you say you were confident that a good kind of Sapia score interview equates to like a good juicer DNA?
That's a very good question. I think that's still a work in progress, as we talked about. It's still in early stages. So for me, it's a lot about getting that data in, ensuring that people are only hiring people or candidates with a Sapia score. And really retraining the model to look for those personality traits and those interview responses. So that's, I can't say that we're there yet, but we're definitely in the right direction. And we can see that what it has done is that it's offering a more diverse workforce. So we're actually considering and hiring people that we've never been considering and hiring before, which is, I think, is hard to measure, obviously, but definitely a good return that we're able to say that we are now in Oslo we hired a 33-year-old architect who's one of our best store managers in that market, who applied on entry level, right? So I think that's a fun case that I'm often bringing up in terms of what has Sapia offered.
Cool. Just as a kind of follow-up question.
Sure.
So was there any challenge from a candidate experience side that you've kind of had to overcome as you were kind of rolling out?
In Sapia?
From the candidate side, if I don't know how you positioned it to the candidate, anything that kind of was a surprise you kind of had to overcome?
Yeah, I think when you're doing this big change, I think majority has been positive and people like to do the chat and like to do it on their own time. We do see some comments that people are leaving in terms of that they would rather speak to a human. And that's simply back to me or back to us, not really explaining the process, because they will be. So if they are put forward to an interview, there will always be a human in the loop. As I said earlier, we strive to be a people-centric company. It'd be hard to say if I just removed all the recruiters and just hired all the yeses. So I think that's the only thing I would think of that. Remember to explain, because there will always be some people that would rather do an interview or think that they are better at an interview, and they will be presented with that if they match the score of the skills profile.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Yes, question over here.
I've just got a quick question about accessibility as well. So I guess sort of how does Sapia sort of accommodate accessible requirements? So in terms of things like text-based answers versus video-based answers, there's obviously a lot of considerations at the moment on sort of DEI scope and making sure that we're creating inclusive experiences for candidates. So I guess how does Sapia do that at scale as well?
Yeah, excellent question. And another one of our kind of core values is making sure that we're giving everyone a fair shot, which doesn't always exist when you have 300,000 applications, right? You're not able to do that. So we've invested quite a bit in accessibility measures. The first of those being Recite Me, which, if you're familiar with that tool, is kind of a skin that overlays the experience, where if somebody needs to blow up text or have something read to them, it really creates that opportunity. That also exists for the TA experience. So if for some reason someone on your team needs that accessibility, those measures are built within that as well. So that's one area that we're investing in. Candidates also do have the option to use voice to text, which I think voice is probably our future, is probably where we're going. And then we'll then translate that to the text that we're analyzing. Essentially, everything gets converted to dots and dashes no matter what. Whenever you incorporate video into a process, you're naturally going to see a dropout rate of about 30%. And that's why we rely pretty heavily on text to begin with, because we want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. Typically, this is going to impact women, people with minorities, or those with disabilities will tend to drop out the moment that you include a video. It is a solution that we have. We don't include AI in our video solution, and it's totally optional. So we have about half of our customers use the video option just to help further streamline that process. But that would come after that chat interviewer. And then we're investing and innovating in some tools where we'll actually own that voice-to-text component. The really tricky thing around that is making sure the transcription is right. And so that will sit in front of the candidate to verify before it is submitted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. We've got two, yes. Mm-hmm.
Until what level do you use Sapia? So is it only the first stage interview where you just get a bunch of people, or does it go really close then to low 40?
It can vary per customer. Would you like to share your flow? Yeah.
So right now we're using it as a screening tool. Obviously, we are collecting all this fantastic data, and I've always had a problem with collecting all this fantastic data and then not using it. So all the personality profiles, all the skills we are saving, having that in our own HRIS as well, so that we have these personality profiles on the employees saved on their bracket, so we can begin to use that when in role.
And then do they get interviewed by a recruiter again?
At a later stage?
Yes.
They're getting their first interview through the chat, and then if they meet the requirements and if we believe based on the Sapia score or the segmentation that we want to talk to them, then they're talking to a recruiter. And in some rare cases, they might be talking to a store manager again. But we also don't want to make the process too tedious because we are hiring a lot of people. So we don't want that dropout rate to be too big or make it too difficult for them to apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. There was one more. Yes, Dan.
What does retraining model look like?
Oh, great question. It was around retraining the model, which I know we said a few times, maybe not everyone has context. So when we take your example, the juicer DNA, we worked really closely together on collaborating. What are the behavioral competencies, personality traits, and communication skills that really lead to the best juicer? Mm-hmm. Right? And that always starts with a little bit of a hypothesis. We work with our people science team to develop that. And we essentially are creating a successful juicer DNA. That is what the model is looking for in those answers and what helps generate the score based on that candidate recommendation. What the beauty of Sapia and using natural language processing and AI is that we can retrain these models to be even smarter over time. So after 100 hires or so, what we can do is look at who stayed with Joe and the Juice, who left Joe and the Juice, and what were the attributes that were attributed to those that stayed. And then we can retrain the model to look for those specific things. So it gets smarter and smarter and more accurate over time, which is really neat. So that's what we think of when we retrain a model. It also happens with the bias testing. So we'll monitor that on a monthly basis. If for some reason we see that a certain demographic is not being treated fairly within that model, we can adjust the weightings within that model and those specific attributes to allow more of those people in. So that's something we're monitoring regularly.
Can it be automated, or is it manual reports that you have to feedback into the model?
We would just need access to your leaver data, essentially. And then we're understanding what is the profile of the people that stayed versus those that left. And then we would be able to do the retrain. So depending on where your leaver data is, it may be an integration with that component, or we can do it more manually where we're looking and matching up who stayed versus who left on a spreadsheet.
As you go as granular as performance data, I guess, in the way.
Performance data is really hard. Number one, it's really difficult to think about performance data with volume. Volume people are normally not necessarily on a rating scale or rated at all. Plus, you're always dealing with human bias in that component. There tends to be a regression towards the mean. So we've considered it in the past, but we're not necessarily looking at performance data when we think about model retrains. Much more indicative with turnover. Mm-hmm. Great question. Yeah. One in the back?
Can I ask a question about the AI? I mean, there's modern AI and there's historic, AI has been around for a while, and AI has been around for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or whatever. Do you have any concept of how many interviews have been done over the years on the platform? How many? Because the AI is only as good as the data, the amount of data and the amount of volume that's in it. Do you have any numbers on that?
Yeah, which is a really important component when you think about shopping for AI, right? The fact that it's used in a context of recruiting is really important, as well as historical data. So we've been around for 7 years. We have done over 5 million interviews to date. The last million came in the last 7 months. So I expect I'm gonna have to update lots of slides quite often on some of those stats, but that's a really key component when you think about data and its effectiveness and validity, is making sure that you have something that predates GPT, which we have a detector that helps us understand if somebody is using artificially generated content, plagiarism, or profanity, which is pretty sharp, as well as the volume of data. So that data, as it continues to grow, is getting smarter and smarter over time too. So when we think about attributing the different competencies and traits to that AI model, that's what continues to get even sharper. Excellent question. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're just gonna share a few last things. So we are gonna be having another event in a couple of months, which we would love for all of you to join. We expect this one to be much bigger because the topic is hot. It's really about navigating the upcoming rules and regulations around AI, and specifically how we adopt that in recruitment. So we've got an excellent customer who's going to be joining us, and some other exciting people. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. And then lastly, I've got, if you want to try the Joe and the Juice experience, you'll see that on the left-hand side of the screen. And then of course, your feedback is always really valued, and we look forward to that. And note that with the Joe and the Juice experience, you'll be able to come back to it too. So if you don't get a full chance to complete the interview here, and we'll leave the screen up as well. But Seb, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.